relative to the state minimum hourly rate.
Yeah. Representative Sullivan moves that we adopt the conference report. The member from Brookline, Representative Flanagan, is recognized to speak against that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just an update, a little bit more research on the bill. Actually, Seattle, Washington was one of the first areas that encompassed an increase to minimum wage. And the University of Washington has done a few studies up there. The interesting thing is, with the change of minimum wage, what has happened was the people that are making minimum wage were hurt the most. That is, if we raise the minimum wage to $12 an hour, anybody under $12 an hour will be getting less and less hours, and anybody making $12 an hour will be there. So businesses are being and deciding staffing based on their income and tenure on the job. So that's another downside that I didn't mention before. And I think in the prior discussions there was some of the impacts that I explained to you as it relates to automation, lost wages, lost benefits, and the other one was outsourcing. The concern I had is showing its face here in New Hampshire. As you might be aware, I cited Panera Bread, where I like to frequent for lunch. Prices have gone up. I talked to the staff. Their hours have been cut. And they also told me, the woman I talked to said that next week they're talking about changes in benefits. And of course, if you go in there, there's already the screens, the touch screens instead of the individuals. So it's all coming true. You increase minimum wage, and all of those things are happening. With that, I encourage you to vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 10. The Chair recognizes Representative Sullivan to speak to his motion. Roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my third time raising up in favor of the raise to the minimum wage. I want to recognize all the folks standing in the hallway who have been encouraging us to vote in favor of this. They've been following the minimum wage since before the session began, and they're continuing to push, and they will continue to push after we pass this today. Just briefly what this bill is, it's a minor change to what we voted on a couple weeks ago. It still raises the minimum wage from $10, from $7.25 to $10 as of January 1st, and then as of January 1st of 2022, it raises the wage to $12. The only difference is that instead of having a tipped wage of 50% of minimum, the tipped wage will now be 45% as it presently is. And so we're maintaining status quo on that. Earlier on, my friend, the ranking member, referred to the fact that there are very few people in the state who are earning the minimum wage, $7.25. I would respond to that by saying if anyone in the state is earning $7.25 an hour, we need to change that. We need to fix it. It's time for New Hampshire to have its own minimum wage. Let's call it local control and not be going by the federal rate. They don't get anything done in Washington. Let's get something done here. Please pass the minimum wage. Thank you.
The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 10. Representative Flanagan has requested a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats. Well, just a reminder for those that haven't turned their voting stations on to please do so. That's better. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 10. The chair recognizes Representative Susi for a parliamentary inquiry. I don't have you signed up. You know, we want to be as fair as we can. I'll recognize Representative Flanagan, even though I didn't have his name up here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my apologies. It might have been truly my error on this one.
Okay.
And Mr. Clerk, you don't have to worry about taking credit for it either. If I know that every piece of legislation has unintended consequences, and in the case of this legislation, I've listed 4 that have come true in multiple media reports and newspaper articles. If I also know that the most dramatically impacted person are the ones that we're trying to help, that is, the ones that are making minimum wage, because now the base of employees is now going to change. And, Mr. Speaker, would I suggest that you vote red and not support the Committee of Conference report? Thank you.
Question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 10. The chair recognizes Representative Susi for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that New Hampshire hasn't had a minimum wage law since 2009, and if I know that the state of New Hampshire citizens have been asking for a minimum wage law, and if I know that it is right for New Hampshire, would I now press the green button to accept the Committee of Conference report? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the motion that the House adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 10. This will be a roll call vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. Okay. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, the House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 207 members voting yea and 143 voting nay, the motion carries. Chair recognizes the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 194, relative to the Insurance Data Security Law.
Yeah. Question before the House is on the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 194. The chair recognizes the member from Epsom, Representative McGuire, to speak against the recommendation. Representative McGuire? Oh. Representative McGuire declines to speak. Roll call has been requested. Yeah, so we're all set to go to the room. Representative Baldessaro has requested a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats. Yeah, I get you. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 194. The Chair recognizes Representative Sylvia for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I believe that a founding principle of our country brought together 13 laboratories of democracy, and if I know that this bill is a piece of model legislation being dumped into our fine state, and I know that this one-size-fits-all package of burdensome regulations will not benefit our Granite State economy, would I then press the red button and celebrate our independence from foreign oppression? Thank you.
Question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 194. The Chair recognizes Representative Butler for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this is the first legislation that the Insurance Department has proposed to deal with the issue of data breaches and security for the data that we all provide in our insurance products, and that this is an important first step for the Insurance Department. And if I know that those larger industries that are overseen by the Gramm-Leach-Bliley bill are exempted, and if I know that the small electronics businesses are exempted as well because they are covered under different statute, and if I know that this is an important consumer protection piece of legislation, would I now support the Committee of Conference report and press the green button? Thank you.
This will be a roll call vote. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 194. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds.
Representative Comey. Representative LaFlamme.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, the House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 210 members voting yes, 142 nay, the motion carries. Chair recognizes the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 216, establishing an autonomous vehicle advisory commission, establishing an autonomous vehicle testing pilot program, and providing requirements for automated vehicle deployment.
Okay. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 216. The Chair recognizes the member from Hampshire, Representative Guthrie, to speak in opposition to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to correct the chairman if I could. I'm from Hampstead. I represent Kingston and Hampstead. So the last time I come up here, we were back and forth anyway, so I don't know if you recall.
That's right.
When this bill first came to the House, I spoke against it, very disappointed in the results, but I thought I'd take another chance, another bite where we have a Committee of Conference, and changing or adding that the bill only refers to level 4 and 5 vehicle doesn't mean a thing. Level 4 vehicles we almost have now, with people are driving around cars that park themselves, that slow down or stop when someone's in front of them. We have all kind of automated vehicles presently, and this bill is really a comprehensive bill, and the Transportation Committee, I know, worked very hard on it. It does set up requirements, but I suggest that the last thing that in the description and in the bill that it's, I'll read it if I may, providing requirements for automated vehicle deployment. And that's the sleeper. This bill is, in my estimation, puts us in a position that our future will be when we'll have automatic vehicles, which will be trucks. I think the transportation industry goal is to have trucks and buses and other transportation vehicles be run without anybody sitting at the wheel. Just consider that. I think we are all in favor of automation, but do we really want to have vehicles on New Hampshire roads without anybody sitting at the wheel? It's a great concept, and maybe, I know I won't see it in my lifetime, and if this goes forward, I suggest that we will have this situation. I think that we should send a message to the transportation industry that we really don't want vehicles unless somebody is watching what's happening. Maybe it's safe to drive, but I suggest we want them to have somebody at the wheel watching what happens. So I would suggest that this is a little bit a dangerous bill, and it really should go back to the drawing board and make some stipulation that level 5 vehicles are not allowed on our roads. And Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call in order to know what kind of interest there is, because I intend to file a bill next year if there's any support.
Okay.
And so I ask for a roll call.
We'll take that motion up after the next speaker, and I thank the member. The chair recognizes the member from Lebanon to speak on the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 216. Representative Sykes.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, I would just like to remind everybody that this is a bill that has gone through a lot of work on both the part of the Senate and the House, and this was an excellent compromise. I would also remind everyone that currently we have no regulations whatsoever about autonomous vehicles. This will set up an ability to take a look at that question and do further work on the issues. And I would urge you to support the Committee of Conference.
Question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 216. Representative Gauthier, the member from Hempstead, has requested a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 216. The chair recognizes Representative Gauthier for a parliamentary inquiry. I'm sorry, Representative Guthrie, I'm doing a terrible disservice to you, and I apologize. It's Representative Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't want to take him to task.
Well, feel free at any time. That's why I get the big bucks.
Yeah, some Scotch names are hard to pronounce.
You're recognized.
I'm going to have the shortest PI probably you've heard. If you want vehicles in the future without anybody sitting at the wheel, vote. What is that? I think you would vote red. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 216. The chair recognizes Representative Sykes for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if I know that this establishes an advisory commission to look at the questions that we're talking about, and I also know that this takes out some of the problems that have been identified and was a good compromise, would I now press the green button and support the Committee of Conference?
This will be a roll call vote. The question before the House is the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 216. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 260 members voting yea and 92 nay, the motion carries. The Chair recognizes the Clerk for a Senate message.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate concurs with the House in the passage of the following entitled Bill, House Joint Resolution 3, making temporary appropriations for the expenses and encumbrances of the State of New Hampshire.
The Clerk is recognized for a further message.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 226, relative to registration of pharmacy benefit managers and reestablishing the Commission to study greater transparency in pharmaceutical costs and drug rebate programs.
Representative Butler moves that we adopt the motion. Representative McGuire, the member from Epsom, is recognized to speak against that motion. Roll call. Representative Baldessaro has requested a roll call vote on this bill. Is that sufficiently seconded? And I recognize the member is seconding it as well. This will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats. The question before the House is the motion for the House to adopt a Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 226. The Chair recognizes Representative McGuire for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this bill creates a new registration requirement, not a license, with a $500 fee, and if I know that pharmacy benefit managers are only the agents of the heavily regulated insurance companies, and if I also know that all the information this bill is looking for is or should be readily available from the insurance companies, which are already heavily regulated by the insurance department, and therefore that this bill is totally unnecessary, redundant, and silly, would I not press the red button against the Committee of Conference report?
The question before the House is the motion to adopt a Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 226. The Chair recognizes Representative Butler for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if I know that pharmacy benefit managers are the most opaque piece of the cost process in the prescription drug costs that come to us, and if I know that even though insurance companies are indeed regulated, the pharmacy benefit managers and access to their data is not readily available, and if I know that registration of pharmacy benefit managers is a lighter touch than licensing and will still help to provide the insurance department with access to data that will give us more understanding of why our pharmacy costs are so out of whack with other countries, would I now support the Committee of Conference report and press the green button? Thank you.
This will be a roll call vote. The question before the House is the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 226. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 208 members voting yea, 143 nay, the motion carries. Chair recognizes the clerk for a message.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 267, relative to the release of student assessment information and data.
Okay. Question before the House is the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 267. The Chair recognizes Representative McGuire to speak against the motion. She declines to speak. Do you want? Okay. You're requesting a roll call? Yeah, okay. Representative Cordelli is requesting a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats. I know. The question before the House is a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 267. The Chair recognizes Representative Cordelli for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this bill began life to allow the statewide assessment firm to mail assessment results to parents and save local districts the time and money from doing that, and if I know that currently some of the districts are in financial jeopardy because they are not sending those results home, and if I know that this Committee of Conference report removes the ability for the assessment firm or the Department of Education to send home those results and save districts money, and finally, if I don't know why this report allows the assessment firm to keep student name and unique identifiers, but removes the felony penalty for releasing confidential information, would I now vote against this report that has really become a worthless piece of paper and ready for Representative Notter's birdcage by pressing the red button?
Question before the House is the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 267. The Chair recognizes Representative Myler for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this bill concurs with the House position, further, if I know that under testimony from the Department of Education that they indicated that they do not have the personnel to collect this information or to send this information out. Further, if I know that the current practice of the vendor sending the test data to the school districts for their submission to the parents. And finally, if I know that this is the 8 years that is in this bill was concurred and recommended by the Department of Education, would I now vote green to support this committee of conference recommendation?
This will be a roll call vote. The question before the House is the motion to adopt the committee of conference report on Senate Bill 267. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, the House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 206 members voting yea, 146 voting nay, the motion carries. The chair recognizes the clerk for a message.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 279, relative to access to fertility care.
Okay. Question before the House is a motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate Bill 279. The chair recognizes the member from Stratford, Representative Wolper, to speak. Oh, you wave off. Okay. Representative Baldassaro has requested a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Yep. Yeah, we don't have one. So. Question before the House is the motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate Bill 279. The chair recognizes Representative Baldassaro for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that SB 267 is a mandate on all, I'm sorry, 279 is a mandate on all people paying for insurances, which will push your insurance costs up. And Mr. Speaker, if I know that this here is a feel-good bill, which we would love to help people have children, but at the same time, the costs should not be shared by every person paying for insurance. And if I know all this here, would I then press the red button? Thank you.
Question before the House is the motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate Bill 279. The chair recognizes Representative Butler for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this bill is an important piece of keeping our young couples in our state to raise a family, if I know that this bill helps to bring fertility coverage and insurance coverage for infertile couples to our state, some of whom we heard leave our state in order to have children and then sometimes never come back. If I understand, Mr. Speaker, that this bill mirrors very much the kind of coverage that we already give to our state employees, and that we use the state employee coverage to define this coverage that we are providing outside of the within the small group market. Would I now press the green button and bring insurance coverage to infertile couples in our state? Thank you.
This will be a roll call vote. The question before the House is the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 279. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, the House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 209 members voting yea, 141 nay, the motion carries. The chair recognizes the clerk for a message.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 290, relative to the New Hampshire Granite Advantage Health Care Program.
Question before the House is the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 290. Representative Wazir has requested a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Question before the House is a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 290. The chair recognizes the member from Milford, Representative Martin, for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that the Department of Health and Human Services has had a horrific time reaching Granite Advantage Healthcare Program enrollees, and if I know that if we don't pass this critical solution, 20,000 plus Granite Staters could lose their health care insurance at no fault of their own, and if I know that our health care providers' uncompensated care rates could skyrocket, then would I please press green and support the bipartisan, unanimous recommendation and adopt the committee report. Thank you.
This will be a roll call vote. The question before the House is the motion to adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 290. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 206 members voting yea and 147 voting nay, the motion carries. What's that? We're now going to take up that one bill removed from the consent calendar. Before I recognize the clerk, I want to let everybody know there is water out in the anteroom. It's warm in here, and we normally don't allow beverages, but by all means, if you want to bring water back to your seat, please do so. And I also want to thank those members that were kind enough to waive off their floor speeches. It is warm in here, and I can see a number of people fanning themselves, so we do appreciate that effort on their behalf. The chair recognizes the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 118, establishing a Child Fatality Review Committee.
Okay. Question before the House is a motion that the House adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 118. The chair recognizes the member from Bedford, Representative Camerata, to speak against that motion.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I need your attention for about 3 minutes, maybe a little more. You may remember, well, you do. I'm Rep. Camerata representing Hillsborough District 7, and today I come before you to represent infants, children, and their loved ones as it relates to Senate Bill 118, relative to establishing a Child Fatality Review Committee with legislative authority. My credentials include parent, registered nurse, graduate certificate in public health, and a career-long passion for medical-related research and preventative medicine. Senate Bill 118 has positive components, without a doubt. However, it needs additional work. Several attempts on my part and others to improve the bill were not successful, generally because of what required protocol at committee level. At the committee of conference which I attended, the only item we could speak to was the amendment, which was to just add the Department of Health and Human Service official to the 27-member committee. The Department of Health and Human Services appoints many of the members to the committee, but its representative was inadvertently left out. Chair Senator Sherman even made a comment noting that no legislators were on the committee. And because that wasn't part of our task, we couldn't address that. I think a legislator should be appointed to this committee. The Office of Child Advocate provided data covering child fatalities for a period from October 2018 through April 30, 2019, a 6-month period. In that time, there were 10 child fatalities in New Hampshire. The Office of Child Advocate is notified of all child fatalities, including both children involved in DCYF and those who are not. Of the 10, 7 were families overseen by DCYF, of which 4 died from substance exposure at birth. 3 of the 10 had no DCYF involvement. Of the 10 deaths, 2 were suicides, and 3 of the deaths were, quote, likely related to unsafe sleep practices. From 2005 to 2015, 51 natural infant deaths, fall under sudden, undetermined infant deaths. They look at suffocation and strangulation in bed, also known as unsafe sleep practices. In another table of the Office of Chief Medical Examiner, the causes of death under the age of 1 year for the years 2014.
Oh, excuse me, could the member just suspend for a moment?
Yes, certainly.
What the member apparently is doing is talking about the underlying bill, and what you need to really concentrate on is that area that brought the House and the Senate to the committee of conference.
Oh, another obstacle.
Yeah, but if you need a second just to collect your thoughts. do so.
Thank you. I will collect my thoughts. Another protocol that has to be followed. So, if that's the case, then what I ask is that you let us work a little bit more on this bill next session and bring this back to you so that we don't have to fix it next year. Thank you.
Question before the House is a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 18. The Chair recognizes Representative Long to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the conferees, the question was adding the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Service or his designee. That was the only change to the House's position, and we acceded to that and hope you agree with the conferees. Thank you.
Representative Baldessaro has requested a roll call vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats. Paul, what's the section? Yeah. We're waiting for people to come back in. I understand there was a rush on the water and it's gone, but we've notified administrative services and they're going to bring more water over, so. The question before the House is the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 118. The Chair recognizes Representative Juris for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that Senate Bill 118 would put into statute the Child Fatality Review Committee, and I know that this review committee is an important provides important insight and recommendations to reduce child fatalities in our great state. And I also know that my other points have nothing to do with the Committee of Conference report. But I also know that those changes did not make the bill more amenable to our position that I've spoken to in previous sessions. Would I now press the red button against the Committee of Conference report so we can take the time needed to get this vital committee properly into statute? Thank you.
Question before the House is the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 118. The Chair recognizes Representative Long for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that it's imperative to have the Department of Health and Human Service serving on this committee, then would I press the green button?
Question before the House is the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 118. This will be a roll call vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you oppose, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds.
Representative Corson. You have to give me a thumbs up.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, the House would be attentive to the state of the vote. With 213 members voting yea, 140 nay, the motion carries. We're going to take a 10-minute break so the clerk can get bills over to the Senate and get us in order for the bills that are coming up. Before we do break, I just want to take a moment to congratulate one of our members. Our good friend from Littleton, Representative Aaron Hennessy, was selected to be this year's recipient of the Henry Toll Fellowship from the Council of State Government, and will be going off to Lexington, Kentucky for a 3-week training, and we are very honored that she was selected, and we think it's a wonderful selection on behalf of CSG, so congratulations.